My name is Nora Ellison, and on Christmas Eve, my grandfather looked across a table full of polished silver, catered food, and people pretending to be decent, and asked me one simple question. Nora, did you ever replace the porch railing on Hawthorne Lane? I remember setting my fork down. I remember the room going silent so fast it felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out at once. And I remember answering him with the only truth I had. What house? 9 people were sitting at that table. My father stopped breathing. My stepmother nearly dropped the gravy boat. My teenage half-sister looked from face to face like she'd wandered into the wrong movie. And my grandfather, the only honest man in the room, realized in a single heartbeat that 2 years of lies had just collapsed right in front of him. That was the moment I found out my father had stolen a house, $400,000, and 18 years of my place in the family. But if you think that dinner was the beginning of this story, it wasn't. That dinner was just the moment the mask finally cracked. If you like slow-burn family revenge stories with real consequences, subscribe now, because what happened after that question didn't just ruin Christmas. It tore open a lie that had been building for years. To understand how one sentence destroyed an entire family performance, you have to go back to a rainy Tuesday when I was 8 years old, to the week my mother died and my father learned how to disappear without technically leaving. My mother's name was Claire Whitmore before she married Daniel Ellison. She taught 2nd grade at a public school in our town. She wore cardigans with mismatched buttons because she was always too busy to fix them. She hummed while she cooked. And every Sunday she would open a wooden recipe box, hand me a stack of faded index cards, and let me pick what we made for dinner. I always picked the tomato sauce. Every single time. And every single time, she'd smile like it was somehow a surprise. Cancer took her in 6 months. Lung cancer. Stage 4 by the time anyone saw it clearly enough to name it. She never smoked, never even stood too close to people who did. But death doesn't care whether you deserve it. At 8 years old, I didn't understand medicine. I didn't understand probability. I only understood that one day my mother was warm and laughing and helping me sound out spelling words, and then one Tuesday she wasn't breathing anymore, and everyone in my house started talking to me like I was made of glass. After the funeral, my father didn't become cruel. That would have been easier to understand. He became absent. He was still there physically, still paid the bills, still slept in the bedroom at the end of the hallway, but it was like someone had taken the center out of him and left only the outline. He worked later, then later than that, first at the repair garage, then helping at the dealership, then staying out so long I would fall asleep on the couch and wake up to the sound of the refrigerator door opening at midnight. He'd stand there in the blue light, staring into shelves full of food he wasn't hungry for, and then close the door and go to bed without a word. The person who kept me from falling straight through the floor in those years was my grandfather, Arthur Whitmore, my mother's father. He was a contractor for most of his life, the kind of man who could walk into a room, glance at the corners, and tell you which wall was load-bearing and which one had been lying to you for decades. He had rough hands, a quiet voice, and the kind of steadiness children trust before they know the word for it. Every other Friday, his old truck would pull into our driveway. I'd grab my backpack and an overnight bag, and we'd spend the weekend at his place. His house smelled like sawdust, black coffee, and rain-soaked wood. He taught me how to patch drywall, reset a loose tile, replace a faucet washer, and tell the difference between something that was broken and something that was just neglected. He also told me stories about my mother, not saintly stories, real ones. How she once broke her wrist jumping off a shed roof because she swore she could fly with an umbrella. How she rescued stray cats. How she argued with a bank manager at 23 until he reversed a fee he insisted was policy. How she never waited for permission to be strong. Your mom didn't ask life to make room for her, Grandpa told me once while we sat on his porch watching a storm roll in over the trees. She made her own room. Then he rested his hand on my shoulder and said something I carried for years without understanding. I'll make sure you're taken care of, Nora. That's a promise. I was 9 years old. I thought he meant emotionally. I didn't realize he meant legally. The woman who replaced my mother came into our house the way winter comes in late November, slowly at first, then all at once. Her name was Vanessa. My father introduced us when I was 10. She had auburn hair, a practiced smile, and the kind of attentive body language that made adults call her warm. She tilted her head when you spoke, held eye contact half a second longer than most people. Brought dessert the first 3 times she came over, asked me questions in front of other people, laughed at exactly the right moments. If you'd met her casually, you would have said she was lovely, and for 6 months, I almost believed it. Then the house started changing around me, not dramatically, quietly. The bedroom next to my father's, the one that used to be mine, became the guest room. I got moved farther down the hall. Just temporarily, Vanessa said, touching her stomach with a smile. She was pregnant. I never moved back. Then the photographs changed. Pictures of my mother disappeared one by one, the frame in the living room, the portrait on the stairs, the candid shot near the kitchen with flour on her cheek and me on a stool beside her. In their place came new images. My father and Vanessa at the beach. My father and Vanessa at a restaurant. My father and Vanessa holding up baby shoes. My father and Vanessa in matching coats at a Christmas tree farm. Two people building a new beginning. And in those frames, there was no trace of the first child from the first marriage, no sign that the story had a chapter they preferred not to read aloud. Vanessa was never unkind in a way I could quote back to somebody. That was part of what made her so effective. She didn't insult me, didn't scream, didn't slap or threaten. She simply arranged warmth as a public performance and coolness as a private habit. In front of neighbors, church friends, or my grandfather, she was all softness. In private, she moved through me as if I were furniture. She'd ask what Lily wanted for dinner and then make exactly that. She'd forget to mention plans until they were already over. She'd speak about family photos without ever calling me into the room until the last second. She'd smile at me the way adults smile at children who belong to somebody else. My father saw all of it. That may have been the worst part. He saw it, and instead of stopping it, he chose the path that required the least courage. The year Lily was born, I learned something ugly. Love can exist inside a home and still be rationed. Lily arrived in January, pink-faced and loud, 7 pounds and a few ounces, and the second she came home, my father became a different man. A present man. A man who held bottles and changed diapers and took photos every day. A man who posted captions online like "my whole world" under pictures that did not include me. A man who seemed capable of tenderness after all, just not in my direction. Lily got the biggest bedroom. I got moved to the finished basement. Vanessa said it like she was offering me a luxury. You'll have your own bathroom. You'll love the privacy. I was 12. I didn't want privacy. I wanted proof that I still belonged upstairs. The basement had one narrow window at ground level, a bare overhead bulb, and the steady hum of the water heater behind the wall, like some machine breathing in the dark while I tried to sleep. Above me, I could hear life happening. Dinner plates, laughter, cartoons, doors opening and closing, the ordinary sounds of a family. And down there, I started learning how to make myself small enough not to need anything. Lily grew into the kind of child people describe as so bright. Dance lessons, soccer, piano, private tutoring, birthday parties with expensive themes and bakery cakes shaped like animals. No one ever asked if I wanted an activity. No one asked what I liked. At some point, even I stopped asking. The one person who never let the line between me and Lily harden into something cruel was Grandpa Arthur. Every month, he showed up with 2 gifts. Always 2. Wrapped in the same paper. Equal in size, equal in care. When Lily got a book, I got a book. When I got a scarf, Lily got a scarf. Not because he loved us the same way, but because fairness mattered to him in the way measurements matter to builders. One Thanksgiving, Vanessa spent 20 straight minutes making everyone watch a video of Lily's piano recital. I was at the sink, washing dishes nobody had asked me to wash. Grandpa came up beside me and handed me a towel. "You doing okay, kid?" "I'm fine." He looked at me the way he looked at crooked framing, not accusing, just assessing. "Good things take time," he said quietly. "Remember that." Later that night, when everyone else was busy, he pulled me aside to the back steps. "When you turn 21, he said, "I've got something for you, something your mother wanted you to have." "What is it?" He smiled. "Patience." Then he squeezed my hand and let the mystery sit between us. I held on to that sentence for nearly a decade, not because I thought it would save me, but because it was the only promise in that house that felt like it had been spoken by someone who meant it. By 16, I had 2 part-time jobs, 1 bus route memorized by heart, and a growing understanding that being ignored and being independent are not the same thing. I worked mornings at a coffee shop, weekends at a dry cleaner, sometimes evenings shelving inventory at a pharmacy when someone called out. I bought my own school supplies, covered field trip fees when I wanted to go, packed my own lunches, learned how to stretch $20 across a week like it was some kind of moral test. That same year, my father poured everything he had into an auto shop he insisted was going to change our lives, Ellison Auto Works. He talked about hydraulic lifts and paint booths and signage and expansion. Vanessa encouraged him loudly. She spoke about our future with the confidence of someone spending emotional money she didn't earn. What she didn't talk about were the calls coming after midnight, the overdue invoices, the arguments through the ceiling, the snap of cabinets, the thin, panicked rhythm of 2 adults trying to decide whether the disaster they built together belonged to one of them more than the other. I graduated high school on a hot Friday in June. Grandpa Arthur was there 45 minutes early in a pressed shirt and boots he'd polished himself. He clapped so hard I could hear it over everyone else. My Aunt June brought flowers. My Uncle Peter brought a card. My father showed up late, stood in the back, and left before anyone started taking photos. Vanessa didn't come. "Lily isn't feeling well," she texted. I never asked if that was true. By then, I had learned not to examine excuses too closely. Sometimes they collapse in your hands and leave you with the uglier thing underneath. I started community college that fall. Business administration. Not because I had some great passion for ledgers and spreadsheets, but because practical dreams are the only kind some people can afford. I stayed home because it was cheaper. Vanessa made sure I understood that home now came with invoices. One morning she slid a note across the counter with a monthly amount for groceries. "It's only fair," she said. I paid it, every month. No argument. The shop failed the next spring. I didn't know the full number until much later, but the short version was this. My father had sunk himself. Debt to the bank, debt to suppliers, debt to a landlord who believed promises counted as collateral. He closed the shop and took a management job at a used car lot 30 minutes away. The house got quieter, not calmer, quieter. The kind of quiet that only happens when people are too scared to say the real number out loud. I moved into my own studio apartment at 22, and for the first time in my life, silence felt like something I had chosen. It was small, tiny, actually. One room with a kitchenette and a bathroom where the sink practically touched the shower curtain. The carpet was cheap, the walls were thin, the thermostat worked when it felt like it. I loved it immediately. I had a full-time job as an office coordinator at a regional insurance firm. The pay wasn't great, but it was mine. So was the rent. So were the groceries. So was the decision to eat cereal for dinner without anyone turning it into commentary on my worth. What I didn't expect was how quickly my phone would go silent once I left. My father called 4 times that first year. Short calls. 90 seconds each. He never asked meaningful questions, never wanted details. He'd say things like, "just checking in," or "hope work is good," in the tone people use when talking to distant relatives they feel obligated to acknowledge. I kept trying to call Grandpa Arthur, and that's where the story should have felt wrong much sooner than it did. His number kept going to voicemail, every time, no name on the recording, no callback. I left messages anyway. "Hey Grandpa, it's me. Just wanted to hear your voice. Call when you can. Miss you." Nothing. I asked my father about it once. He said Grandpa had gone down south for treatment on his knees, said he was resting, said warm weather was helping, said not to worry, and because the alternative was too painful, I believed him. I told myself old people drift. I told myself phones get lost. I told myself silence happens. What I didn't know, what would make me physically sick when I learned it, was that Grandpa Arthur had been calling too. Calling my father. Calling Vanessa. Asking for me. And each time, they fed him some new variation of the same lie. "She's busy. She changed her number. She's doing great. She never answers anymore. She's in that phase where young people don't want to be bothered." Meanwhile, he had already transferred a house and $400,000 to my father with one instruction. Give it to Nora. My father said he would, then he never did. On my 24th birthday, a card arrived late, postmarked 3 different times, forwarded, bent at one corner. Inside, in my grandfather's handwriting, were the words, "Hope you're settling into the new place, kiddo. I knew you'd make that house feel alive." I stared at it for a long time. Then I pinned it to my fridge and told myself his memory was slipping. That card sat there for months. A clue I did not know how to read. The invitation came in December. 2 lines. No warmth I trusted. Christmas Eve dinner at our place. 6 o'clock. Wouldn't feel right without you. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the part that made my pulse jump. Grandpa Arthur will be here too. That same night I called my Aunt June, my mother's younger sister, the one person in the family who had never spoken to me like I was an afterthought. "Grandpa's back?" I asked. There was a pause on the line. "Nora? He's been asking about you every week." My hand tightened around my phone. "What?" "Every week," she repeated. "He thinks you're avoiding him. Daniel and Vanessa kept saying you were too busy to call him back." It is hard to describe what betrayal feels like when it finally clicks into focus. People talk about heartbreak like it explodes. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it rearranges itself inside your stomach with perfect quiet, and you realize 2 years of grief had been built on someone else's lie. I sat down on the edge of my bed. "He was asking for me?" "Nora," Aunt June said softly, "he's been worried sick." I said yes to the dinner before I had enough sense to protect myself. Hope does that. Hope makes fools out of people who've been starving. The night before Christmas Eve, I stood in my bathroom mirror wearing the one thing I had never thrown away, a cream cable-knit sweater my mother made the winter before she died. It was slightly uneven at the hem. One cuff was looser than the other. At the inside collar, she had stitched a tiny C in pale thread. Claire. I kept it wrapped in tissue paper in a cedar box. Every time I opened that box, it smelled like memory and cold weather and the version of my life that ended too early. I pulled it over my head and stared at myself in the mirror. I didn't know then that Vanessa had invited me for the same reason she'd always kept me close enough to photograph when Grandpa was around, because appearances were an investment, and I was the prop she needed for the evening's final performance. I drove up at 10 minutes to 6. The first thing I saw was the SUV, pearl white, new, expensive, parked in the driveway like it had always belonged there. The second thing I noticed was the house itself. The place I grew up in had been upgraded almost beyond recognition. New siding, new windows, a widened garage, a rebuilt front porch with cedar railings and black metal fixtures, fresh landscaping, custom stonework near the walkway, and standing there in the cold, one thought moved through me with absolute clarity. My father could not afford any of this. Inside, the math got uglier. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, a sectional sofa big enough for a magazine spread, a television mounted over a redesigned fireplace. A Christmas tree that touched the ceiling, decorated so perfectly it looked curated instead of loved. Vanessa opened the door and hugged me with the kind of warmth that takes rehearsal. "Nora, sweetheart, you look beautiful." She smelled like vanilla and cinnamon, the exact candle scent my mother used to burn every Christmas Eve. That tiny theft hit me harder than it should have, because some people don't just steal money, they steal atmosphere. Lily was on the couch scrolling through her phone, 14 now, fashionable, polished, and dressed in a sweater that cost more than my electric bill. She glanced up. "Hey!" Then she went back to her screen. I wandered toward the living room bookshelf and saw something that made my skin go tight. 3 framed family photos. In all of them, I was smiling. At a lake, at a birthday dinner, at a backyard barbecue. The problem was, I didn't remember any of those moments. At first I thought maybe I was tired. Maybe grief had blurred more than I realized, but then I looked closer. In the lake photo, the sunlight on my face was coming from the wrong direction. At the birthday dinner, the edge of my shoulder looked too sharp against the background. In the barbecue picture, I was wearing a blouse I had donated 3 years earlier. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Then, half hidden on top of a kitchen cabinet behind a stack of holiday napkins, I saw a wooden box. Oak. Worn smooth at the corners. Brass hinge. My mother's recipe box. I knew it instantly. Vanessa followed my line of sight, took one smooth step sideways, and dropped a folded dish towel over it. "Can I get you something to drink?" she asked. That was when I knew the night was going to end badly. I just didn't know how badly. She had set the table for 9, and somehow still managed to make my seat feel like an afterthought. I was placed at the far end, beside an empty chair and a wall. Aunt June walked in 5 minutes later, took one look at that arrangement, and dragged her chair across the floor until it landed right beside mine. Her husband Peter sat on my other side without saying a word. Some people don't confront cruelty directly. They disrupt its geometry. My father sat at the head of the table. He looked older, grayer, thinner in a way that wasn't about fitness and was absolutely about stress. He greeted me with an awkward half-hug and immediately turned to the wine opener like it needed engineering precision. 2 family friends rounded out the table, Marcus Cole and his wife Tessa. Marcus had known my father for years through the car business. He had the expression of a man expecting dinner, not a collapse. Vanessa floated around the room filling glasses and narrating Lily's life as if reading from a press release. Honor roll, boarding school applications, piano competitions, summer leadership program, volunteer hours. Then she turned toward me with a bright smile. "And Nora, how's the insurance office?" "Fine." "That's wonderful." And just like that she moved on. Not because the answer satisfied her, because the question had never been real. Aunt June leaned closer. "How are you really?" That nearly undid me on the spot. "Better now," I whispered. She squeezed my hand under the table. Across from me, Lily tilted her head and asked, "You still rent?" The room stiffened. Then she added, with all the careless cruelty of someone repeating a worldview she did not invent, "That sounds scary." "Lily," Vanessa murmured, not in a way that corrected her, in a way that performed correction. I said nothing. Teenagers don't create atmospheres, they inhale them. And then the doorbell rang. The sound cut straight through the room. Vanessa's expression tightened for half a second. I saw it. Fear. Not of me, not of dinner, of timing. Grandpa Arthur walked in carrying two things. A cloth gift bag in one hand, a leather briefcase in the other. The gifts were for Christmas. The briefcase was for war. He looked thinner than the last time I'd seen him, but his eyes were still the same, steady, intelligent, impossible to fool twice. He saw me, stopped, and for a second, his whole face changed. Nora. I stood so quickly my chair scraped the floor. He crossed the room, set everything down, and pulled me into his arms. I buried my face in his shoulder and smelled cedar, coffee, and cold air. Home. Not the place. The person. He held me away from him just long enough to look at my face. You look so much like your mother. I almost cried right there. He greeted everyone else with polite efficiency. A nod to June, a handshake for Peter, a neutral hello to Marcus and Tessa, a brief, unreadable glance at my father. A good to see you to Vanessa that somehow managed to contain no warmth at all. Then he sat in the empty chair beside me and placed the briefcase on the floor within arm's reach. Close. Ready. While Vanessa bustled around adding a plate and over-smiling, Grandpa leaned toward me and lowered his voice. I've been trying to call you for months. The number your father gave me never worked. For 1 second, I actually stopped hearing the rest of the room. I never changed my number, I whispered. His jaw shifted. Not surprise, confirmation. Then he took my hand under the table. His palm was rough and warm and steady, but his fingers trembled once, and that was when I understood something crucial. He didn't come to dinner to celebrate Christmas. He came to verify a betrayal. The question came in the middle of the main course. No warning, no raised voice, no theatrics. We were halfway through the meal. Vanessa had just set down the gravy. Lily was talking about a school tour. My father was on his third glass of wine. The room had settled into that smooth, self-satisfied rhythm families perform, when everyone is pretending the structure is sound. Grandpa cut a piece of turkey, chewed, set his fork down, then looked at me with the same calm expression he used when asking if I wanted more mashed potatoes. So, Nora, did you ever replace the porch railing on Hawthorne Lane? That old place had good bones, but the front porch needed work. I put my fork down. What house? Silence. Not the ordinary pause of conversation. The kind of silence where even the Christmas lights seemed too loud. Grandpa leaned back a little. The house on Hawthorne Lane, he said. I signed it over to your father for you 2 years ago, along with the transition fund. I stared at him, then at my father, then back at him. What are you talking about? He frowned now, not confusion, precision. The house, and the $400,000. I heard Aunt June inhale, heard Peter set his glass down, heard Marcus stop moving entirely. I looked at my father. I never got a house. He didn't speak. I never got any money. Still nothing. Vanessa's hand tightened so hard around the gravy boat that her knuckles went white. Grandpa turned slowly toward my father. The movement was so controlled it felt more dangerous than rage. Daniel, he said, where is her house? My father swallowed. Dad, it's not... Where? Grandpa repeated. Is her house? My father licked his lips. There was a misunderstanding. That word hung in the air like an insult. Vanessa stepped in immediately. We were protecting her, she said. She was so young, and it felt irresponsible to put all of that on her at once. Property taxes, maintenance, decisions. Grandpa lifted one hand. She stopped talking. Not because she respected him, because for the first time in the evening, someone in the room had more authority than she did. I signed the deed in April, he said. I wired $400,000 to your account the same week. I told you to transfer both to Nora immediately. My father looked at the tablecloth as if it might rescue him. Aunt June's voice came out thin and tight. What do you mean you wired him money? Grandpa reached down, lifted the briefcase, set it on the table, and opened it. The clasps clicked in the silence like tiny metal verdicts. Inside was a thick folder, tabbed, labeled, organized. He took out the first document and placed it in the center of the table. Deed transfer, he said. Signed by me, acknowledged by Daniel, Hawthorne Lane property. Then another sheet. Wire confirmation, $400,000, memo line, for Nora Ellison, House and Transition Fund. Then an email printout. I asked if she got the keys and account details, Grandpa said, reading calmly. Your reply was, all taken care of. She's thrilled. My father had gone pale enough to look almost translucent. Vanessa's eyes were glassy now, but no tears had actually fallen. Marcus stood up first. What the hell is this, Daniel? Peter spoke next, quieter and much colder. This is fraud. Aunt June turned to Vanessa. You knew? Vanessa said nothing, and silence, in that moment, was more incriminating than speech. I looked down at my plate. The gold trim, the crystal, the expensive linens, the matching holiday decor, the renovations in the next room. I thought about the overtime I'd worked, the nights I'd skipped dinner out because I needed rent money, the times I'd walked past coffee shops because spending $4 felt irresponsible. Then I looked back up and asked the question that split the room completely open. When were you planning to tell me? Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it. My father tried. We were going to... When? That one word hit harder than I expected, because I suddenly understood that the theft was not the worst part. The worst part was that they had sat across from me, month after month, watching me struggle, and decided I didn't need the truth. Or maybe didn't deserve it. Grandpa closed the folder and folded his hands. I didn't come here to make a scene, he said. I came to give my granddaughter her Christmas. Then he looked directly at my father. But now I need to know where her life went. My father confessed the way weak structures fail. Not all at once, in stress fractures. The shop collapsed, he said finally. I was drowning. The debt was everywhere. The bank was coming after us. We were trying to hold everything together. Vanessa snapped toward him. Don't you dare make this sound like my idea. He stared at her in disbelief. You said we had time. I said we needed options. Grandpa didn't raise his voice. Did you spend the money? My father shut his eyes. Yes. All of it? A longer pause. Then, yes. The room exhaled, and there it was. The number. The truth. The thing everyone had been circling but not saying aloud. He had spent every dollar. I heard my own voice before I really felt myself decide to speak. The renovations. No one answered. Lily's tuition. Nothing. The SUV. My father looked up, shame mixing with desperation. Nora. That was my money. Not a question. A statement. Vanessa tried one last performance. We did what we had to do to survive. I turned to her. No, I said. You did what was easiest to justify while it benefited you. The mask slipped then. Not fully, just enough. A flash of irritation, coldness, the look of a woman who had spent years crafting a character and was furious the audience had seen the seams. Grandpa stood up, slowly, deliberately. Then he walked to the bookshelf and picked up one of the framed photos. This one, he said. You sent it to me in July. You said the family spent the weekend at Lake Mercer. He held it toward the table. I looked at it again, really looked. I wasn't there. Aunt June got up, took the frame, and tilted it beneath the chandelier. Her brows drew together. The lighting is wrong, she said. She grabbed the second photo. And this edge here, it's edited. Marcus took the third. This is fake too. No one moved. Then all at once the meaning landed. They had fabricated family photos, not just to impress social media, not just to decorate the house. They had sent them to Grandpa to make him believe I was included. Happy, present, part of the life they were funding with my inheritance. That was the moment theft turned into erasure. Money is one kind of betrayal, but manufacturing false evidence that someone is loved, that is a different cruelty altogether. Lily started crying first. Not pretty tears, not soft tears. The devastated, choking kind that belong to children when the adults around them finally stop pretending. Mom, she whispered. Is that true? Vanessa stared at the table. Mom? Nothing. My half-sister learned in that moment what I had learned much younger. Silence from certain people is its own confession. I stood up. My chair scraped hard against the floor. The sound seemed to wake everyone. Marcus grabbed his coat. Tessa looked like she might be sick. Peter had his phone in his hand, not recording, just holding on to the instinct that this needed witnesses. Aunt June looked ready to launch herself across the table. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. My anger was too old for volume. I looked at my father. I spent 2 years thinking Grandpa forgot me, I said. I spent 2 years wondering why I was working overtime, just to survive while you lived in rooms my money paid for. I thought I had been left behind. My voice stayed calm. That made them listen harder. You didn't just steal from me, I said. You let me believe I was unwanted. No one spoke. I turned to Lily, who was crying so hard she could barely breathe. This is not your fault. She nodded quickly, as if she needed permission to fall apart. Then I looked at Grandpa. Can we go? He was already reaching for the briefcase. He collected the documents, closed the clasps, straightened his jacket. Then he looked at my father one final time. My attorney will contact you on Monday. This isn't over. He said it the way skilled men say everything important, without drama, without threat, without leaving room for misinterpretation. I picked up my coat. took my mother's sweater from the back of the chair, and walked out of the house without looking back. The air outside was brutally cold, honest cold, the kind that bites cleanly. We drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. Snow moved through the headlights in diagonal streaks. Grandpa's truck heater rattled like it had a personal grudge against winter. I watched decorated houses slide past us and wondered how many families inside them were real and how many were just better lit. Then Grandpa spoke. "Your mother would have been proud of how you handled that." I laughed. Or maybe I broke. It came out halfway between the two. Then I cried. Not for the money, not even for the house. I cried because grief had been manipulated. Because I had spent 2 years blaming myself for a silence that had been engineered. Because I had been trained to accept scraps so thoroughly that I almost thanked people for stealing the meal. "I called him 40 times, I said. Grandpa's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I know." "How did you find out?" He exhaled slowly. "A man I used to work with drove past Hawthorne Lane, saw Daniel on a ladder painting shutters, called me and asked why my son-in-law was living in the house I gave my granddaughter." I closed my eyes. That single sentence must have detonated in his chest. "I spent 2 months pulling records," he said. "Bank documents, emails, deed history. I needed proof before I came at them." He glanced at me. "I thought maybe you knew and didn't want to talk about it." I shook my head. "No." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "I know that now." By midnight, my father had called 7 times. Not once did he say sorry. His messages were exactly what cowards send when consequences finally arrive. "Please let me explain. You don't understand the pressure. Don't let Grandpa destroy this family. We can fix this. Call me back." The word forgiveness never appeared. Neither did the word stole. Aunt June called around 10:30. "You should know," she said. "Marcus and Tessa left right after you. Peter and I left too." Vanessa threw a plate at the kitchen wall. Daniel sat there like someone had unplugged him. I could picture it perfectly. The expensive plates. The perfect kitchen. The image shattering before the bills did. Then, just after 11, a text came from Vanessa. "You always wanted attention. Congratulations." 5 words. That was all it took for 18 years of careful politeness to reveal what it had always been underneath. Contempt with lipstick. I showed the message to Grandpa. He read it once, stood up, walked into the kitchen, and made a call from the landline he refused to replace because, in his words, things that need charging can't be trusted. When he came back, he set down 2 mugs of instant coffee. "Attorney's drafting the demand letter Monday," he said. Then he looked me straight in the eye. "Your father isn't asking for mercy, Nora. He's asking you to stand between him and what he earned." That sentence changed something in me, because he was right. All my life, I had been the cushion, the quiet one, the understanding one, the easy loss. The person expected to absorb discomfort so everyone else could keep pretending the arrangement was acceptable. Not anymore. The attorney laid out the numbers 3 days later, and each one felt like another nail driven through whatever illusion remained. Her name was Margaret Shaw. Sharp voice, no wasted words. The kind of woman who made you sit straighter through a phone line. She had traced most of the money. $180,000 to kill the auto shop debts, $58,000 for Lily's private academy and fees, $42,000 in renovations to the house I grew up in, $39,000 for Vanessa's SUV, $27,000 in travel and vacation rentals, tens of thousands more in furniture, decor, dinners, memberships, and other things expensive enough to feel chosen. Then she delivered the part that made me grip the kitchen counter. Because the deed had never actually been transferred to me, Daniel had used the Hawthorne Lane property as collateral for a second mortgage. He borrowed against a house he was supposed to hand to me. My knees went weak. They hadn't just stolen my future. They had mortgaged it. I poured water, drank it too fast, poured another. "What do you want to do?" Grandpa asked quietly. That question mattered because it was real. Not what should happen, not what would be easiest. What did I want? I looked at the old clock in his kitchen and answered with the first truth that rose up. "I want out." He nodded once. "Then let's build you a way out." A week later, Aunt June arrived with a cardboard box. "I went back," she said. "This didn't belong there." Inside was my mother's recipe box. She had found it on top of Vanessa's kitchen cabinet, hidden behind dish towels and grocery coupons. I opened it carefully. The index cards were still there. Tomato sauce, chicken soup, apple pie, pot roast. My mother's slanted blue handwriting, little notes in the margins. "Nora likes extra basil. Double this for Arthur. Hide the pepper from Daniel." I smiled through tears. Then, beneath the last divider, I found something that wasn't a recipe. A folded card. On the front, in my mother's handwriting, "For Nora, when she's old enough." Inside were 2 lines. "The house on Hawthorne Lane was always meant to be yours. Dad knows why." I stared at that card until the words stopped looking like language and started looking like proof. Proof that this had not been Grandpa improvising after her death. Proof that my mother had seen ahead. Proof that somebody, at some point, had intended for me to have safety. Vanessa had been storing coupons in the same box. And somehow that detail hurt more than the money. Because numbers are abstract. They can be counted, traced, litigated. But using a dead woman's keepsake as kitchen storage? That's the kind of disrespect that tells you exactly how much humanity the thief thinks their victim deserves. 2 weeks after Christmas, I got a text from an unknown number. I didn't know, I swear. It was Lily. Using a friend's phone, "Mom told me not to contact you." I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. "Are you okay?" The answer came back slowly. "I don't think so. Everything feels weird now. Dad sleeps downstairs. Mom cries and then acts normal in the morning. I asked if the money was yours, and she told me to focus on school." I could picture her perfectly, sitting cross-legged on her bed, door locked, trying to understand the moral structure of the home she'd been raised in, then the message that mattered most. Does this make me a bad person? I closed my eyes. There are questions children ask that reveal exactly how badly adults have failed them. "No," I wrote back. "This is not your fault. You didn't choose any of it. 3 dots. Then, Mom says you're doing this for attention." I almost laughed. That old line again. People who build their lives on other people's silence always call truth-seeking drama. I wrote back, "That sounds like your mom." A minute later, "I miss you. Is that weird?" It wasn't weird. It was the most honest thing anyone from that house had said in years. We texted for half an hour that night. About books, music, school, pizza toppings, nothing too heavy. But under all of it was a new fact, one no one could untell. Lily was starting to see, and once a child starts to see, controlling the story becomes much harder. Margaret's demand letter went out the first Monday in February. 4 pages. Elegant language. Very expensive precision. It demanded full restitution, transfer of all remaining rights connected to Hawthorne Lane, reimbursement for 22 months of rent I never should have paid, acknowledgement of conversion of assets, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraudulent concealment. It also mentioned the manipulated photographs. That part, Margaret said, mattered more than it sounded, because fake family photos suggested intent, not confusion, not delay, a plan. My father responded in 3 days, not in writing. He called Grandpa. I heard only Grandpa's side of the conversation from the next room.